This is not Liberation Day in America, it's Recession Day, because Donald Trump's reckless policies are driving us toward a painful recession.
Happy post-Liberation Day, and boy was it an interesting holiday, considering Donald Trump announced reciprocal tariffs on nearly every single country in the world, and Republicans and Democrats actually worked together in the Senate, and boy do we have mixed opinions on that vote. We will get to that in a second. Now in this video, we will go over the most recent MSNBC and CNN meltdowns in this video. We have a lot to get to, so let's get to it.
If you look at Switzerland, 61% to 31%. Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia. Oh, look at Cambodia, 97%. We're going to bring it down to 49. They made a fortune with the United States of America. United Kingdom, 10%. And we'll go 10%. So we'll do the same thing.
All right, let me give you a baseline real quick before we get to the meltdown so you guys can actually form your own opinions here. Essentially, Donald Trump was showing how these countries have high tariffs on the United States, thus with a reciprocal tariff, essentially it's to counterbalance or to countercharge a tariff on the other country and hopefully level out the tariffs and everybody calms down with the tariffs. Now the question is, how is Donald Trump doing this? Well, with the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, essentially the president has broad authority to regulate a variety of economic transactions following a declaration of national emergency. So I hope this makes sense. Now let's get to the meltdowns.
My advice to every country right now is do not retaliate. Sit back, take it in, let's see how it goes, because if you retaliate, there will be escalation. If you don't retaliate, this is the high watermark.
This, I think fair to say, is worse than the worst case scenario of the tariffs that many in the market expected the president to impose. You laid out a number of the percentages there, and there's some question of how the administration calculated the percentages that they're responding to.
All right, if you take a look at the screen, I gave you guys the actual amount or chart of the tariff rates from other countries on the United States. I'm curious how you guys feel about that, but I'm also curious how you guys feel about this clip.
Tariffs are a terrible mistake. They don't work. They will lead to higher prices. They are a tax, and they have historically been bad for our economy.
I told you Liberation Day would be rather interesting. First off, that's MSNBC agreeing with a Republican. Second off, that's Rand Paul, a Republican senator from Kentucky who voted with Democrats to make sure that Canada doesn't get hit with these reciprocal tariffs. We'll get to that later.
You're making an assumption. You are making an assumption, an economic assumption right now. Let's be very clear. The real pain economically has been the massive inflation coming from bloated overspending here in Washington, D.C. That is the real pain that the American people have felt the last 4 years. What President Trump is trying to do now is bring industries back to the United States. So it's not so much pain. You might have some temporary adjustments in our economy, but that is for the growth of the American economy long term, stability and jobs over the long term for the American people and American workers.
Countries push back on how these non-tariff barriers were calculated. Will there be wiggle room here? Exactly when do these go into effect? How quickly are companies going to have to adjust their pricing? So many questions.
All right, I want to talk to you about Aura, today's sponsor, because they're doing something really important. Look, I could go online right now, pay a few bucks, and buy anyone's personal data. It's 100% legal, no joke. Big companies get hacked every day, and your personal info is sold to scammers and spammers. They target you, and those companies face zero consequences. If the government can ban TikTok, why aren't they doing more to protect us from this? It's on us to take control, and that's why I use Aura. Aura handles the hard stuff for me. They track down where my info's being sold, and I make sure I'm off those lists. In just a few weeks, I stopped seeing my name pop up on shady sites. They also monitor the dark web for leaks and alert me if anyone tries to use my info to mess with my credit or bank accounts. And if the worst happens, they got my back up to $5 million in identity theft insurance. Plus, Aura's got a VPN with 100 plus virtual locations. Does your VPN do all that? So go to my sponsor, aura.com/T-SPLY, T-S-P-L-Y, to get a 14-day free trial and see if any of your data has been exposed.
And that is actually a good way to take our economy, as opposed to following the same terrible policies of the previous administration and the Democrats writ large of just subsidizing industries and raising the debt of the United States. That is not the way that you actually build an economy. There's an old saying in finance: you can make markets jump, but you can't make them fly. And when you follow the old way, the Biden-Obama way of just subsidizing industries, yeah, you make them jump. You can make people feel good in the interim, but it's not sustainable over the long term. Donald Trump is looking at the long-term financial outlook for every American.
Now, we have quite the contrast of arguments between Democrats and Republicans, and I'm really curious how you guys feel about this. Democrats are straight up playing the short game. That, look, once you start to impose these higher tariff rates or reciprocal tariffs, we don't know what the other countries are going to do. Thus, the consumer will feel the effects immediately within the stores. Now, from Republicans, not all of them, but the main argument is this is the long game. This should work, and if it does work, essentially more money will be brought back to the country, thus being beneficial for everyday citizens.
No, I may be liberated from anything in a 401k, as millions of Americans will feel that impact, and will be liberated from any chance of having lower prices for things. This is going to be a disaster for our economy. It's going to be a disaster for hardworking families that are going to have to pay more for auto parts or getting their car fixed or, buying groceries or anything else. These other countries, many of whom are our closest allies, are going to retaliate against us.
Now, I just have to say this. I do find it ironic when a Democrat is saying this will mess up your 401ks when we know there's one stock in particular that's been dropping due to a lot of Democrats protesting a certain stock or company, Tesla.
Because of they are the ones that shop where you're talking about and use some of the products that are going to immediately go up. There's no reason to think that these CEOs, many of whom are Trump supporters, or at least were during the election, would be lying about we're going to have to go up on the prices.
Now, I think you'll find this interesting. Despite the left-leaning media absolutely freaking out over these reciprocal tariffs, we do have indicators that Mexico is willing to talk to Donald Trump. Specifically, the Mexican president is saying we do not want to go tit for tat or eye to eye. And it looks like Mexico does want to work with the United States and also Canada, by the way. I found this interesting clip for you.
It's just, again, it's going to hurt both countries. It's going to hurt American workers. That's the last thing I want.
Andrew meant take the other ones off, not the ones you're launching today. The ones that you already got.
You're saying you take all your tariffs off. I'm saying
we will take them off. That's right.
Then why is that not? I guess my question is, why has all of that not already happened? And does President Trump know that you'd be prepared to do that?
He knows. And
so you heard it straight from Canada. If the United States drops all of your tariffs, Canada will drop all of our tariffs. And again, you also have Mexico willing to work with the United States. Did Donald Trump just pull off one of the best negotiations we've ever seen in the world? Again, we don't know exactly when these tariffs are going to be set in place, but what we do know is we just heard the leadership of Canada say we are ready to drop the tariffs. All of them.
I know things are hard for you right now, so I'm trying to pivot.
Look, here's the deal. What Anna said is absolutely correct. There may not be a more closely held, longer-term held view about the economy that Donald Trump has and the idea that tariffs will work. Here he comes on our screen. And you know who else is on that South Lawn? A bunch of people in hard hats. So the political ramifications of this, they think they are appealing to the working class of America that put him in office not once but twice.
Not a trade war, depends on the country, but remember that the history of trade is we are the deficit country. The deficit country has an advantage. They are the surplus countries. The surplus countries traditionally always lose any kind of a trade escalation. So I did, as a student of economic history or a professor of economic history, I'd advise against it.
So you're essentially saying that they should not retaliate?
I would say that doing anything rash would be unwise.
Now, despite the Trump administration saying, look, we have the upper hand, we actually have some Republicans who say otherwise, that, look, tariffs are not good for the country. Not only are they not good for the country, we don't even need to do tariffs because on the grand outlook of things, we've had plus economic status. The United States has made more and more money. Now, I'm going to play this clip. I'm really curious how you guys feel about this.
Taxation without representation is tyranny, bellowed James Otis. I don't want to live under emergency rule. I don't want to live where my representatives cannot speak for me and have a check and balance on power. One person can make a mistake. And guess what? Tariffs are a terrible mistake. They don't work. They will lead to higher prices. They are a tax, and they have historically been bad for our economy. But even if this were something that was magic and it was going to be a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, I wouldn't want to live under emergency rule. I would want to live in a constitutional republic where there are checks and balances against the excesses of both sides, right or left. If one person rules, that person could make a horrible mistake. On things so important as war, it's the same thing. We don't want a president just to go to war because a president might get angry with some country or have a vendetta. We're supposed to vote. That's why declaration of war. War originates also in Congress.
All right, so we have a lot to break down. Number one, we saw a couple of arguments here. Argument number one was from a standpoint of the Constitution in the United States. No taxation without representation. Rand Paul was appealing to the Constitution and saying, look, if we're paying taxes, I want representation from the Senate and Congress, which is vital because we'll get to that in a second. Essentially, he's saying, look, if one president makes the wrong decision, Republican or Democrat, it could be a massive problem, and you saw he made the example. We vote together even on declarations of war. Why wouldn't we when it comes to these emergency policies and tariffs? Argument number two that you saw is that he was appealing to the fact that this is bad for the economy and tariffs don't work. Now, there were 4 Senate Republicans who joined with Democrats to rebuke Trump tariff policies, specifically on Canada. Basically, this act or policy was to make sure that Canada doesn't get hit with more tariffs than they already have through the United States. Again, we have this tariff war back and forth. As you saw, Canada said they're willing to drop the tariffs. If the United States, they're willing to drop all of their tariffs. But again, this was already being written up. This was not like a last second thing. We just did not know whether or not Republicans would actually side or vote with Democrats, but again, they did. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people are saying this doesn't really matter, and it's more of a symbolic thing because down in the Congress or the House of Representatives, they're most likely or very likely going to vote in favor of Donald Trump and make sure that these tariffs do get imposed and that they can sideswipe this out of the way and not support the emergency halt for Canada as far as these reciprocal tariffs. Now, I can't find any comment from Donald Trump as far as this action as I make my video, but when you're watching this video, I'm curious whether or not Donald Trump would have comment on this and if he had some words for Rand Paul.
Well, probably my worst fears, to be honest. This is much bigger than anyone expected. This is, Smoot-Hawley territory in terms of the size of these tariffs. For perspective, the U.S. Congress is working like mad to avoid a sunset of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act because a $425 billion tax increase next year, it will knock the economy sideways, if not into a recession. And this is much bigger than that, and doing it right now. And so the risks are enormous. And that's just what the president announced. Mm-hmm. If Mexico and other countries retaliate, as one would expect they would. They saw him in 2018. They watched him on the campaign trail. They've been planning this. They've got the U.S. farmers in the crosshairs, and they're going to retaliate on our most productive sectors. And if the response is going to be even higher tariffs, it's a bigger self-inflicted wound. It's also a bigger wound on the global economy. Yeah. And tit for tat, trade wars are what have produced really, really prolonged downturns in the past.
Prolonged downturns, and of course, and I'm not trying to make everything analogous, but have come before horrible times of war. I mean, just to be, that just has also been a historical reality. over the past
trying
century.
to find the silver lining here, Aaron. Come on.
No. Sarah, to the point, though, looking at the markets here, just as we're speaking, and obviously futures markets can be very volatile.
Leader Jeffries, what's your response to these tariffs?
Trump tariffs are going to raise costs on everyday Americans in an environment where there's already a high cost of living. Trump promised that he would lower costs, in fact, on day one, but what we've seen under his reckless leadership is that costs aren't going down in America. They're going up. Inflation is going up. The stock market is going down. Consumer confidence is going down. And the retirement security of the American people is going down. This is not Liberation Day in America. It's Recession Day, because Donald Trump's reckless policies are driving us toward a painful recession.
He's saying, look, America's been taken advantage of by these other countries. He listed the tariffs they have on American goods coming into this country, and that long term, this is going to bring manufacturing back to America and make Americans wealthy.
All right, thank you guys so much for being here. I'm going to be honest with you, I am a little hopeful, and I do find it a good thing that Canada is willing to drop all of their tariffs if we are willing to drop all of our tariffs. Again, the big thing is that Canada is our #1 trade partner. So we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know if Donald Trump is swindling the whole world, but we really want to work with Canada this whole time. We don't know what's actually going on. So this is going to be rather interesting. Now, what's also going to be interesting is whether or not, goods start to go back up again. We just got over the egg prices, and we've heard about egg prices every single day for the last 3 years now. So I'm a little hopeful. We'll see what happens. Hopefully everything goes well, but thank you guys for being here. God bless, and we'll see you guys later.